My daughter called me from the hospital on a Tuesday morning in October, and I was standing in my kitchen in Phoenix, still in my bathrobe, watching the coffee drip. "Mom, she's here. Maura's here." I sat down right there at the kitchen table. A granddaughter. My first grandchild. I told her I was getting in the car that afternoon. "Wait until the weekend, Mom. We're still getting settled. You know how Marcus gets with too many people around." I waited. I gave them 4 days, which felt like 4 years. I packed a bag, drove the 6 hours to Tucson instead of flying, because I wanted the time to think, to imagine what she would look like. I stopped in Benson and bought a yellow stuffed rabbit, and a white blanket so soft I held it against my cheek in the store parking lot. When I pulled into their driveway, my daughter met me at the door. "Just her. Where's the baby?" I said. I was already looking past her into the house. She stepped outside instead of letting me in, pulled the door almost shut behind her, and that's when I knew something was wrong. "Mom." She looked at the ground. "We have to tell you something." I don't remember sitting down on the porch steps. I just remember being on them. She explained it in pieces. The way people do when they know the words are going to break something. Maura had been born with a condition called Spina Bifida. They'd known about the possibility for weeks, from an ultrasound, but hadn't told me because they didn't want me to worry, they said. "Didn't want me to make it a big deal," Marcus said. "The baby was born with paralysis from the waist down. She would never walk. She would need surgeries, specialists, lifelong care. We made a decision," my daughter said. I looked up at her. They had surrendered Maura to the state 3 days after she was born. A voluntary relinquishment, the papers called it. My son-in-law had researched it. He'd talked to lawyers. It was already done. "We can't do this," she said. "Marcus's job, our apartment, we're not equipped. The medical costs alone." "I will pay for it," I said. "I will pay for everything." She shook her head. The adoption was moving through the system. They'd chosen a closed placement. They didn't have information about where Maura would go, or they wouldn't share it. Either way, I couldn't get to her. They'd made certain of that. I asked to see my son-in-law. My daughter went inside and came back out alone. "He doesn't want to have this conversation. She is a baby," I said. "She is your baby. She is not a problem you hand off." My daughter's face didn't change. That was the worst part. She'd already made the peace with it that I never could. I drove back to Phoenix that night. Didn't stay, didn't sleep in their guest room like I'd planned. I just drove north on I-10 with the yellow rabbit on the passenger seat and cried until I couldn't see the road and had to pull over in a rest stop outside of Picacho. I sat there in the dark for a long time. Maura had been alive for 6 days. My name is Constance, and I was 62 years old. The night I decided I was going to find my granddaughter. I didn't know how long it would take. I didn't know what she would need when I got to her. So I started at the beginning. I called my doctor the next morning and asked her to refer me to the best physiatrist in Phoenix, a specialist in rehabilitation medicine in spinal cord conditions. I told the receptionist I needed to understand everything about Spina Bifida. What children with the condition could do, what they needed, how to build a life around it. The doctor looked at me across her desk at that first appointment and said, "Are you the parent?" "I'm the grandmother," I said. "I'm going to be raising my granddaughter." She nodded slowly, like she was recalibrating. Then she started talking, and I wrote down everything. That was the beginning. I hired a private investigator named Gil, a retired police detective out of Scottsdale who'd done missing persons work for 30 years. He was direct about it from the first meeting. "Voluntary relinquishments move through a specific pipeline," he said. "Closed adoptions are sealed by the court." He would try, but I needed to understand it could take years. He'd had cases that never resolved. "I understand," I said. "Keep looking." I paid him for 6 months and he found nothing. I paid for 6 more months and he found a partial record. A placement in Maricopa County, then transferred. The trail went cold again. I hired a second investigator, a woman out of Tucson who specialized in adoption cases. She'd been adopted herself, she told me, which was why she did this work. I trusted her more for that. In the meantime, I learned. That's what I did with all the hours I was not searching. I took a course in rehabilitation therapy at the community college, not for a credential. Just to understand the body, to understand what Maura's spine meant for her daily life. And what it didn't have to mean. I volunteered at a children's rehabilitation center in Tempe on Saturday mornings, helped with activities, watched therapists work with kids in wheelchairs, learned what adaptation looked like in practice. The parents there looked at me with a mix of gratitude and exhaustion that I recognized from somewhere. Not grief exactly, something more like determination that had worn itself smooth. I went home and renovated my house. I know how that sounds. I renovated it for a child I hadn't found, for a granddaughter I'd held for 0 minutes of her life. I had the bathroom on the main floor widened, had a ramp built alongside the 2 porch steps, had the kitchen counters assessed for accessibility. My neighbor watched all of this from across the street and finally came over one afternoon, while I was meeting with the contractor. "Constance," she said carefully. "What exactly are you expecting?" "My granddaughter," I said. "Eventually." She didn't know what to say to that, so she went home. I went back to talking to the contractor. I didn't speak to my daughter for almost a year. She called twice. I let both calls go to voicemail. I wasn't ready. I didn't trust myself not to say things that couldn't be unsaid. My sister thought I was being too hard on her, that she'd made a decision under pressure, that Marcus was the problem and my daughter had just followed him. Maybe. But she'd followed him off a cliff and taken Maura with her. I couldn't pretend that was a small thing. 2 years in, my investigator in Tucson found a thread. A child matching Maura's profile, age and condition had been moved from a group foster placement in Pima County to a private facility in New Mexico. She couldn't confirm it was Maura. The records were sealed. She needed more time. I gave her more time. I kept going to the rehabilitation center on Saturdays. There was a girl there named Simone who came every week with her father, 7 years old, Spina Bifida, same level as what Maura's chart had indicated when Gil found that early fragment of paperwork. Simone was furious about everything in a way that made me love her immediately. She didn't want help with things she could do herself, and she made that clear with a look that could strip paint. Her father apologized for her constantly. I told him to stop apologizing, that she was right to insist. He laughed, surprised. Nobody had said that to him before. I thought about Maura every time I watched Simone navigate the world on her own terms. I thought about whether anyone was letting Maura insist on things. Whether she had a father like this one, tired but present. Whether she had anyone. Year 3, I was 65. My knees hurt from driving and from the hard floors at the rehabilitation center. I didn't stop. My second investigator picked up a stronger lead. A private residential care facility in Albuquerque. A place that took children with complex medical needs who were waiting for placement. A girl had been there since age 1, deaf. No, I'd misread that. That was a different file. This girl, 8 years in residential care, not yet adopted. Spina Bifida, age matched. I drove to Albuquerque the next morning. The facility was called Sagebrush House. A converted ranch property outside the city, single story, wide doorways, ramps, everywhere. Gardens in the back. A woman named the director met me at the front desk. I told her I was looking for my granddaughter. I explained as much as I legally could without tipping the facility into a defensive posture. She looked at me for a long moment. "We have a child here," she said carefully. "I can't confirm any identifying information, but I can tell you she's been with us since she was 14 months old. She's 9 now." I did the math in my car later. 14 months. Born in October, placed with the state 6 days after birth, moved through the system for more than a year before landing here. That part aligned. "Can I meet her?" I asked. "Not today, let me make some calls. If you're who you say you are, and your granddaughter is who you think she is, we can arrange something. But I need to go through proper channels." Proper channels took 3 weeks. 3 weeks where I drove back to Phoenix, sat in my kitchen, and stared at the renovated bathroom. Then I drove back to Albuquerque and checked into a motel on Manal Boulevard and waited some more. My investigator was working the legal angle from her end. She found a family law attorney in New Mexico who'd handled grandparent standing cases before. He was cautiously optimistic, which I had learned to distrust from years of cautious optimism going nowhere. But I liked him. He was direct. The director of Sagebrush House called me on a Thursday afternoon. She said I could come in on Friday morning to meet one of their children. She didn't say a name. I didn't sleep. I arrived at 9. She walked me through the building, past common rooms with wide doorways and low tables, past a room full of adaptive sports equipment, to a back garden where several children were outside in the late morning light. "Over there," she said, and pointed. A girl sat at a wooden table near the garden wall, a book open in front of her, not reading it. Looking at the sky. She was small for 9. Dark hair pulled into a braid, wearing a purple sweatshirt. Her wheelchair was angled, so she could look over the garden wall at the mountains in the distance. "Her name here is Maura," the director said quietly. My throat closed. They hadn't changed her name. Whether by accident or design, whoever had moved her through the system had kept the name my daughter had given her. Maura. I walked across the garden. She didn't look at me until I was close. "Hi," I said. She looked at me with a flat expression that I recognized. The expression of a child who has been looked at by too many adults with too much intention. "I'm Constance," I said. "Can I sit with you?" She shrugged. I pulled a chair from the next table and sat down. We were quiet for a minute. I looked at the mountains the way she had been. "The Sandias," she said, without me asking. "They're beautiful." She looked at me sideways. "You're not from here, Arizona," I said. "Phoenix, why'd you come here?" I thought about what to say. "I've been looking for someone," I told her, "for a long time. I think I might have found her." She looked at me directly for the first time. Her eyes were my daughter's eyes. I had to look away for a second. I went back inside and asked the director about the records. She pulled a thin folder. "Born in Tucson, voluntary relinquishment at 6 days. Private placement collapsed at 14 months due to the foster family relocating, transferred to the state, moved to Sagebrush House at 16 months. No family contact, no adoption inquiries. No one had come for her. I need a DNA test," I said. "I believe she is my granddaughter." The director was quiet for a moment. "You've been looking how long?" 7 years, I said. She nodded slowly. "I'll help you arrange it." It took 10 days. 10 days where I drove back to Albuquerque every morning and sat with Maura in the garden or in the common room. She was guarded the way children are when they've been disappointed too many times. She answered my questions in the shortest possible way. She asked me almost nothing about myself, which the staff told me was typical. She'd learned not to get attached to visitors. But on the 3rd day she showed me the book she'd been pretending to read when I first walked up. It was about the Apollo missions. She had opinions about the lunar landing that she delivered with complete authority. And I agreed with all of them. And she seemed mildly suspicious that I did. The DNA results came back on a Friday. My attorney was with me when I got the call. 99.8% probability. Maternal lineage confirmed. I put the phone down on his desk and cried in a way I hadn't since that night in the rest stop outside of Picacho. 7 years. The legal process moved faster than I'd expected. Or maybe I'd just gotten used to things taking forever, and this felt fast by comparison. I had the house, the income, the modifications already in place. The attorney argued the case clearly. Sagebrush House filed a supporting statement. The court appointed a guardian ad litem who spoke with Maura 3 times. After the 3rd visit, the guardian told me, "She wants to know if you're actually going to stay." I met with Maura that afternoon. We were in the common room. I signed something at her. I'd been teaching myself ASL for the last 2 years, because I'd read that many children with complex medical needs, in residential care, had communication delays, and I wanted to be ready for whatever she needed. But Maura didn't need that. She had language all over the place, and she looked at my hands and then at my face with that flat look. "What are you doing?" she said. "Sign language," I said. "I've been practicing." She stared at me. "I can talk, I know. I wanted to be ready either way." She seemed to think about this. Then she signed back to me, slowly and deliberately, a phrase she'd apparently picked up somewhere. "You're weird." "Probably," I said. She almost smiled. In the courthouse, the judge asked her if she understood what was happening. Maura said yes. The judge asked if she had any questions. Maura looked at me and then back at the judge. "What if she changes her mind later?" The judge looked at me. "I drove to Albuquerque every single day for 3 weeks. I said to Maura, not to the judge. "I renovated my house 3 years ago for a granddaughter I hadn't found yet. I'm not changing my mind." Maura was quiet. "She won't," the director of Sagebrush House said from her seat. The judge looked at her. She shrugged. "You can tell." The papers were signed. We drove to Phoenix next week. Maura's things loaded in the back of my car. She had 2 boxes and a backpack and the Apollo book. She looked out the window the whole drive. When we turned onto my street, she sat up straighter. "Which one?" she said. "Gray one with the red door." She studied it as I pulled in, looked at the ramp alongside the porch steps, looked at the wide front door, looked at the garden. "You did all that before you knew it was me," she said. "Yes." She was quiet. Then, "Okay." The first month was hard. Maura woke at 5 every morning, dressed herself completely before I was up, and sat in the kitchen waiting. She ate fast. She checked the back door twice before bed every night, like she was confirming it was still there. Her occupational therapist, who started coming to the house twice a week, told me this was normal, that kids from residential care carried specific anxieties that took time to unknit. I learned not to startle her, learned to say where I was going before I left a room, learned that she liked the door to her bedroom, left open at night, but didn't want me to check on her, just to walk past where she could hear my footsteps. She started school in January. A public middle school 4 blocks away with an accessible campus. She hated it the first week, tolerated it the second, and came home on the 3rd Friday with a girl named from her science class who wanted to hear about the Apollo missions, and Maura talked for 40 minutes straight without stopping, and I made them both quesadillas and tried not to look too happy about it. The second year, things shifted. Maura joined the school's adapted sports program. She wasn't interested in basketball, which most of the other kids played. She was interested in table tennis, which she played with a ferocity that the coach called a little intimidating. She placed 3rd at a regional competition in Flagstaff and came home with a bronze medal that she put on her desk and never mentioned again, which I knew meant she was proud of it. That year she also asked about her parents. We were making dinner, her chopping peppers at the counter, me at the stove. She didn't look up when she asked, "Why did they give me up?" I turned the burner down. I'd thought about this conversation for a long time. "Because you have spina bifida," I said. "And they decided that meant they couldn't raise you." "Did you know they were going to do it?" "No. I found out after." She chopped for a minute. "What did you do when you found out?" "I got in my car and drove to their house to try to stop it. I was too late. Then I started looking for you." She looked up at me. That day?" "That day," I said. "I called an investigator the next morning." She was quiet for a while. "Do you still talk to her, my mom?" I set down the spoon. "We've talked a few times since I found you, mostly about you. She knows where you are." Maura nodded slowly. "Does she want to see me?" "She said she does." "That's your call, whenever you want or never. Either answer is okay." She went back to chopping. Didn't say anything for a couple of minutes. "Not yet," she said. "Okay," I said. "Not yet is fine." Then on a Wednesday morning 2 months before Maura's 13th birthday, an email arrived from an address I didn't recognize. I almost deleted it. Then I saw the name in the signature. My son-in-law. I hadn't heard from him since that day I'd sat on their porch steps in Tucson. He wrote that he knew I didn't want to hear from him, that he understood if I didn't respond, that he and my daughter had divorced 2 years after surrendering Maura, that he'd moved back to Oregon, where his family was, that he was remarried. He said he'd heard from my daughter that I'd found Maura, and that Maura was living with me. He said he had a son now, 8 years old, who'd been diagnosed with a developmental delay at age 2. He said that raising his son had taught him things he hadn't known before, things he wished he'd known then. He wasn't asking for anything, the email said. He just needed me to know that he understood now what he hadn't understood then. That he was sorry, that he had been wrong about what a child's life could look like, about what was possible. He did not ask about Maura. He'd been careful not to. I sat with the email for a long time. Then I closed the laptop and went to find Maura. She was on the back porch reading, the Apollo book open on her lap again. The same one she'd carried from Albuquerque and which she'd read enough times the spine was cracking. I sat down in the other chair. She looked up. "You have a look, your father emailed me," I said. Her face went careful and still in the way it did when she was deciding how to feel about something. I told her what the email said, not all of it, just the relevant parts. That he was sorry. That he had a son with a disability now. That he hadn't asked about her specifically and had been careful not to. She looked at the mountains for a while. We didn't have the sandias in Phoenix, But there were the South Mountains to the east, the superstitions on the horizon. He figured it out when it was his kid, she said. Yes, not when it was me. No, she nodded. What are you going to do? Nothing, I said. Unless you want me to do something. She thought about it, closed the book, opened it again. Tell him I'm okay, she said. You don't have to say anything else, it's just that. I went inside and opened the laptop. I wrote 3 sentences. Maura is well. She is smart and funny and stubborn, and she placed 3rd at a regional table tennis competition in Flagstaff. That's all I'll say for now, but I thought you should know. I sent it before I could reconsider. A week later, the email from my daughter arrived. She'd known it was coming, she said. Had been thinking about whether to write for months. She wasn't asking to be forgiven, she said. She understood if forgiveness was not something I could get to. She just wanted me to know that she thought about Maura every day. That she was in therapy. That she was trying to understand what she'd done and why. She asked if she could send Maura a letter someday, whenever I thought it was right, if it was ever right. I didn't respond immediately. I waited a week. Then I went to Maura. She was doing homework at the kitchen table, a geometry textbook open in front of her. She put her pencil down when she saw my face. What now, she said. I told her. She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I got up and poured us both a glass of water and came back and sat down. Not yet, she said finally. Same thing she'd said before. Okay, maybe eventually. She picked up her pencil. But I need more time. That's fair, I said. There's no deadline. She looked at me sideways. You're not going to tell me to forgive her? No, I said. That's not my call. She seemed to turn that over. Then she went back to her geometry, and I went back to my book, and we sat in the kitchen together with the evening light coming through the window. While she worked out angles. And I read about things that had nothing to do with any of this. And the house was quiet in the way. It only got now that it had 2 people in it instead of 1. I hadn't known, when I started, how long any of this would take. I hadn't known if I'd find her. I'd had nights, more than a few, where I sat at my kitchen table with the renovated bathroom down the hall and the ramp on the porch I'd built for a child who might never come. And I had wondered if I was chasing something that had already closed. But I hadn't stopped. I'd learned instead. Learned her condition. Learned what she might need. Built the house around an absence and waited for the absence to fill. Now she was at my kitchen table doing geometry. That was everything. That was more than I'd known to hope for, on the night I drove home from Tucson with a yellow rabbit on the passenger seat and pulled over in the dark to fall apart. I'd like to hear what you think. Did my daughter deserve the chance to reach out? Or was it too late for that? Leave a comment and let me know. And if this story meant something to you, subscribe. We're building a community here, where it's never too late to fight for the people you love.